Well, that was a quick season, wasn't it? It feels like just yesterday we were talking about the crossover and the premieres, and now we're already at the end.
I know, it's crazy.
Time flies.
First, I wanted to tell you to specifically that when I was in Chicago during the last month of shooting, I got the flu and I was stuck in my apartment for a week. And one night I fell asleep to your podcast talking about episode 15, and it lulled me into sleep. Not because it was like I was bored, but it made me feel comforted, and I fell asleep.
Oh,
It's
thank
a
you.
compliment. That sounds bad, but I
Yeah.
meant it as a compliment.
I'm glad we were able to provide some comfort at least.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
15 was the Ripley episode, right?
Yeah. It was
That's funny.
the well. We call it the well episode, right?
Oh, that's so funny.
So
All right. Well, let's start with some previews for the finale because it's going to be a crazy one. So we've got to start with the big news from the penultimate that Hannah's pregnant. I know. Hannah expressed her desire to have kids for the first time this season. So why now, especially after what happened with Lizzie?
well, I mean, the why now is, I guess there is no why now because it was an accidental pregnancy. But sometimes in life when these things happen, it's like it kind of in hindsight feels like it happened at the exact right time. And I think that's probably, kind of the situation with Hannah. This was not, this was planned from the very beginning of the season, in episode 3, when Hannah loses her patient. That patient, Elise, asked her, do you want to have kids? And then she thought about it right in that moment. She goes, actually I do. And so that was the whole beginning of this plot line. And, and we were able to explore it more by bringing her sister Lizzie back and exploring that relationship.
Yeah, and so speaking of Lizzie, obviously we saw Hannah ignoring Lizzie's calls while she's like finding out this news. I guess she assumes that that Lizzie will be mad at her for this, or like at least not be taking it well.
Yes, that's exactly right. I think that one of the things, from our standpoint, is that when we started this Lizzie Hannah story, we started it in the context of that Lizzie was the bad sister, basically, that she, because of her drug addiction and her selfish behavior in the past, and the fact that they lost their mother when she was born, and that her older sister had to raise her, that Lizzie had sacrificed a lot for Hannah, and Hannah had just kind of screwed her over in a lot of ways. But what we're hoping that the audience takes away as this goes on is that Hannah's really trying to make up for this. But what I feel like we're finding out is that Lizzie's not an ideal sister. She has her justifications and reasons, but she's not always being fair. And I think that Hannah senses that. So I think that the reason Hannah's ignoring the call at the end of episode 21 is because she's like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be carrying a child for my sister, and now I'm having a baby. She's not going to react to that well. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that in the finale that Lizzie does not react well. So
yeah. And we got a really pleasant surprise in the penultimate in that we got to see Robin and Anna for the first time in multiple seasons. What made now the right time to bring them back and explore Dr. Charles's family a little more?
Well, I've said before, I grew up being a huge fan of medical dramas. Never thought I would get the opportunity to be on one. So I watched St. Elsewhere and I watched ER, and I was super excited when they would bring back characters that hadn't been on in a long time as a TV fan. And so I assume that fans of Chicago Med love seeing people come back from the past. And I think there's a balance between the past and the present. We don't want to live in the past. It would be, sorry, I got a phone call there. I hope you can hear me still. But the reason is because of Dr. Charles's arc, and we were kind of exploring the fact that although he's a stellar psychiatrist, he's a bit lonely and hasn't dealt with his own issues as well as he has dealt with other people's issues, and that he is kind of an avoider in a way. And so, he had issues with Sarah Reese, so we brought Sarah Reese back so he could, kind of have to answer for some of the things that he did in the past. And he kind of like considered having a romantic relationship with Jackie, but at the end of the day, he kind of backed away from that because on some level he doesn't feel he deserves that. And Jackie calls him on that. And then so at the end of the season, when I talked to Oliver Platt about the end of the season, I said, we Oliver and I call it the trilogy, and that's what we think the last 3 episodes are for Charles, is that really make him do a deep dive into like what for most people is the most painful thing of all is, you know, your history with your family. And that's why we brought back Anna and Robin and his mother,
Yeah.
you know, that we could really get into the family unit and his family history and all that's bubbling below the surface for Charles emotionally there.
Yeah, and obviously we saw in the promo for the finale that the kid from this past week's episode, her father, you know, pulls out a gun and aims it at Frost. How worried do we need to be about Frost's fate in the finale?
Oh, I think you should be worried about everyone's fate in the finale, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen, but like, you know, it doesn't mean it won't.